All right. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the Seeing Ability podcast, where we're discussing the world of disabilities. We're going to be having conversations with adults who grew up with a disability, parents who are raising kids with special needs, and those who support them. So we're going to be talking with medical professionals, with educators, and with the many people who work in amazing nonprofits doing work to support this community. I'm Jim Littlefield-Dalmares, and I'm your host. Thanks so much for being here. We know you have a lot of choices when it comes to podcasts, and so we appreciate you listening in. We also know that your time is valuable. I don't know about you, but I've got some podcasts I listen to where episodes are like an hour and 15 minutes, and I love it. But we've designed this podcast to be a little bit short, and today that's going to be a bit of a challenge because once you meet our guest, you'll realize I could talk to him for hours, and probably you could listen to him talk for hours. I might have to have him back for a second visit. So we'll try to keep it brief today. That's my promise to you. We like to start off with a little bit of an intro. For those of you who have never met my guest today, Dr. Chuck Dietzen, I'm going to do a little bit of background and then we'll jump in. First of all, Dr. Chuck is a pediatric rehab specialist, and he probably got his love of working with kids growing up in Kokomo, Indiana, being part of a household that housed 150 foster kids. So kids were kind of his thing growing up. Now, when he decided to go in medicine, I think it was originally veterinary medicine, then it turned to being a doctor specializing with kids. He got his undergrad at Purdue University. He got his doctorate in medicine at Indiana University and started his residency in rehab, physiatry, rehab medicine, if you will, at Alabama. Now, Dr. Chuck turned his sights beyond our borders when he kind of got that bug for working with people overseas on a trip to the former Soviet Union in 92, a trip to Haiti in 93, and then had a chance in 97 and 98 to not only take a trip to India, but not only meet, but work alongside Mother Teresa. Not something that you hear every single day. Now, today, he is the founder of Isalis Healthcare. He's the medical director for Easter Seals Crossroads, medical consultant at St. Francis Healthcare, the medical program consultant at Bradford Woods. He's the first medical director of the Champ Camp. You see his shirt there. That's a summer camp for kids with respiratory issues. He's a published author of a book called Pint-Sized Profits. And when I met him, he's also got an alter ego you'll meet today called Dr. Doom. Chuck, that's a long bio, but it's worthwhile. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Oh, we're so glad to have you. Now, we talk a lot about the world of disabilities, but we're all just people. So you might have heard from previous episodes, I start off with what we call the Fast Four. And today I'm excited to announce we actually got a sponsor for the Fast Four. The Fast Four is brought to you by the folks at Reliable Tech Help. So for all your IT needs, reach out to Reliable Tech Help at 502-797-7399. Are you ready for the Fast Four?
I am.
Okay, let's go. Number one, what's your favorite junk food?
Favorite junk food. Oh, boy. Probably kettle cooked potato chips.
There you go. Can't go wrong there. Number two, your favorite TV or streaming show?
It's funny. I try not to allow myself to get hooked on the TV shows or the ones that recur. So, boy, I'm trying to think. I watch a lot of Netflix. I love documentaries.
There you go, documentaries. Okay.
That have a time limit.
After today, I'm thinking somebody wants to make a documentary about you. If we were to look at your playlist, what's one of the songs we'd find on it?
Probably anything from ELO. That was my favorite band in high school, Electric Light.
Okay, that's old school. We like that. Yep. And then it's that time of year. We're doing this episode in February. It's winter. If you were going to be whisked away for a little break, where would you head?
Well, I just got back from St. Kitts.
That's right. I remember that.
But I love Costa Rica.
That's why you look so refreshed. Okay, so there's a million things we could talk about, but I thought we'd start with your book, the title, Pint-Sized Profits. What was the motivation for putting that book together? And then kind of your message about how these children you've been able to be around all these years and be a medical professional with, how they've influenced your life.
Well, I often tell people, I say, I love my job. I have the best job in the world. I'm the caregiver of my spiritual leaders. And as I was taking care of all of these children, which not only was I doing pediatric rehab, but I was also doing pediatric hospice work for 7 years and still get called to meet with families. I don't run the program, but I still talk with a lot of individuals who are approaching those types of life threatening and even life ending situations. And I just again felt so blessed to be there, to be at their bedside and to work not only with the children but their parents. And so it was important to me to share that information. And so I often talked with parents and in fact invited parents to be part of the public speaking work that I did, because it was so important that they be involved in that and take something that was painful and tragic, but at the same time led to a lot of spiritual growth. So it seemed to me I was pushed. I was actually in the Amazon rainforest doing clinics, and one of the volunteers was with YPO, and he kept saying, "You need to write a book. You need to write a book." I said, "I don't want to. I love to tell those kids stories." So he suggested, just do it like you're telling their stories, kind of as they say, talk your book. And that's what I did. I sat down and just started dictating the stories as I told them to people. Then we fashioned it into a book. But most important, it's a memorial to those kids.
Fantastic. Yeah. And if you listeners, if you haven't had a chance to check that out, please take a look at that book, Pint-Sized Profits. Now, being a medical provider, I know a lot of our discussion is with parents raising kids with special needs. I know when my daughter Sophia was born, she was 26 weeks, a pound and a half. It kind of threw us into this really unanticipated world of medicine, doctors, surgeons, surgeries, treatments, all these things that you had to kind of consider, all this jargon thrown at you. So what would be your advice to parents on kind of how to learn to get their footing and kind of navigate that world of raising a child with special needs, especially a medically involved child?
What was always important to me was to be able to take all that Latin and those big words. I always told families, I said, "Oh, well, we use those big words so that we appear smarter than we are. But I need you to understand in plain, simple English what this is." And what I always did with all of the admissions to the unit, and the first time I ever saw a patient, I would spend a full 1 hour, and every follow-up was 30 minutes. And I just said, that's how I practice, and I'm not going to change. And part of that was to always bring up like any images. I want them to visualize what it is, and I want them to clearly understand. These processes are not hard to understand. It's just that we use different terminology. So look for someone who can speak plain, simple English to this. And the other part that was important to me when I would visit with the children, I typically, and by the way, the doctors I trained, the residents, the med students, the fellows, I trained them to speak to the patient, interact with the patient. And I always said, look, good parents are going to be eavesdropping on everything you say, and it's going to sink in a lot more what you're saying to their child than what you're saying to than what you are saying to the parents. And so that's what I did, is I encouraged that. And what was fascinating to me was years later to hear a lot of these patients who then became young adults and told me how important that was, that he's the doctor that got on the floor and spoke to me. So I think you need to look for a certain personality and a certain spirituality. And don't forget that healthcare is a consumer business. I mean, that's certainly the way the hospitals are going these days.
Absolutely. So I think for a lot of folks, they don't know exactly, if they maybe have someone who's not making it simple to understand, the ability to ask questions and keep asking questions until you understand what's going on. Can you speak to that? Yes,
I think that is, I always enjoyed that. I don't see it as, in fact, the old white coat, my TED talk, I just drop it on the floor, go, that's a barrier. I don't want anyone to come to me and think that I don't have time for them. The greatest outcome for their child is that they clearly understand what this is, what's our best approach now, and then how are we trying to prevent some of the medical complications that can happen there. So yes, I think you ask the questions over and over, and if it is frustrating the doctor, then perhaps it's not the right doctor. There aren't a lot of us, granted, not a lot of pediatric rehab docs, but I do think there are enough out there who really are committed to this and committed to the children. And you've got to find someone who is communicating in a good manner that's understandable. That's why I was always so supportive of the parent programs and showing up for any of whenever I got invited to parent support groups, because I think a lot of the parents become such experts. I would tell people, look, I might be the expert in pediatric rehab, muscular dystrophy, cerebral palsy, but you're the expert on Susie, or you're the expert on Jamal. And it was important to me that we are bringing that, integrating that together.
Yeah, I think that's so key, is this idea that there's all these different people you might work with, but the person who knows your child best is you, the parent.
Correct.
And the person who's kind of the quarterback of the team, if you will, the center that coordinates everything, is you, like you said, along with your child. And the idea, you even said it's a consumer business, that if it's not the right fit, you might go a different direction. You can take that level of control. In the beginning, I think it can be overwhelming, and you just kind of feel like you're getting all these words and all these terms and all these diagnoses, but kind of finding your own place, your footing, that like you're the captain of the ship, if you will.
Exactly. And a lot of people look to me thinking, well, you're the doctor, you're the one that has to sign for all of this to happen. But I always made clear to the family, look, this is a team. This is a very interdisciplinary team, and the team leader is your son or daughter. But in this case, if they can't speak for themselves, you are the designated team leader. Yes.
Right. Yeah,
they're
speaking for them.
Right.
Now, I remember not long after we met, I got to see you as a different type of doctor. I believe Dr. Doom. Tell me a little bit about the origin of that work. Where did it come from? And then some of the stories, both. I know there's stories where you're working with kids who are medically fragile enough that maybe in some cases their parents are freaked out that you're getting them on a wrestling mat. And in other cases, I remember you telling me stories of some of the just wonderful, magical things that have been whispered into your ears by the kids. So let's go back. Where did it all come from? Dr. Doom.
Yes, I was practicing in Ashland, Kentucky, but I was consulting in Corbin, Kentucky, and then I went back to Indiana. Then I was also consulting back at Cardinal Hill Hospital in Lexington. So had a good long history, about a 10-year history probably in Kentucky. And while I was in Ashland, Kentucky, I was helping coach a high school wrestling team. I was the assistant coach. I was pretty intense as a high school. I did a high school, junior Olympic, and AAU wrestling. And my hope was, my dad worked in a factory, and because of all the brothers and sisters I had, plus all of the foster children, I knew my dad couldn't send me to college. So in 7th grade, when I found out how hard it was to get into veterinary medical school, my sister told me, and I said, okay, well, then I need to be state champion. I need to be valedictorian of my class. And so I began that route. Thankfully, I did not get a college scholarship for wrestling. I did get academic scholarships. And it was just a great sport, learning self-discipline, how to sacrifice, how to fast, those types of things. And, when I ended up doing all of this, the background in sports is real good for our specialty. So they had written a big article about me in the Ashland Independent, I think was the name of the newspaper, and full page of all these different sports I'd done. So I get a phone call, would I help coach wrestling? And I said, yeah, that'd be great. Then one day some of the wrestlers got lazy and they weren't doing their sit-ups and their push-ups. And I just kind of lost my cool and said things you probably shouldn't say to high school wrestlers. And I told the coach, I said, look, I probably shouldn't do this anymore. And, but good luck. And I continued practicing, of course, at King's Daughters Medical Center and Our Lady of Bellefonte Hospital. And lo and behold, within a week or two, this guy shows up in my office, Don Belt, and my office manager said, Don Belt is here. He's his son, Jason, is on the wrestling team. And I said, well, I'll apologize. I shouldn't have said what I said. And I thought that's what it was going to be about. But he said, hey, my son told me about your background in amateur wrestling. Would you like to do pro wrestling? And I said, heck yes. I said, so within a week or so, I'm the manager of the U.S. Express Tag Team Champions as Dr. Death, and then began training with Mr. Wrestling 2 to become Dr. Death. But Jack Kevorkian ruined that, of course, during that time. A 16-year-old patient saw me in the unit, and in front of my older patients, because I was doing general rehab at the time, he yells, "I know you, you're Dr. Death." And I thought, oh, I better go make a phone call to the promoter. And I said, at that point, I said, we need to change my name. That's when I became Dr. Doom.
Okay.
And years later, there I am at Cardinal Hill Hospital, and this kid, Todd Wise, I'll never forget, he's out there somewhere, Tough Todd, as we called him. He's sitting in his chair laughing, and he's very spastic at the time. And I said, "What is so funny?" And Jennifer, the nurse, said, "Oh, he's been dying to meet Dr. Doom." And I said, "Oh my gosh, he already knows this." So I grabbed him, reverse headlock. Yeah, I have his mom unbuckle him. I said, "We'll just stand him up and suplex him onto the mat here. I'll take a look at him." That's what I did. I just said, well, it's not going to hurt him, and that'd probably be a good lesson for mom and dad. So I grabbed him, reverse headlock, and suplexed him onto the mat. And he was laughing so hard he couldn't breathe. Mom and dad, on the other hand, I think were going, maybe we came to the wrong doctor. But 3 weeks later, we did the first Timmy takedown. We've been doing it ever since. So about 27 years now, 25, 27 years that we do the Timmy takedown. And what's important to me is set up these opportunities for the kids that, despite disability, let's set the arena where they show their abilities. And yeah, it's priceless. It's precious, the things these kids say. And one little guy, we said, "Well, what do you want to do?" "Oh, a leg lock or two." And Brian and I get laughing so hard. We just, we never intimidate them. And I finally won a match last year. I'd lost about 860 consecutive matches, but one of the kids insisted I win last year. And then he came to me and he said, "Okay, you got what you need. Now I want what I want." He goes, "That'll be $20." So I said, "Well, you understand how this business is."
Absolutely. So what do you think, what's been some of the impact that you've seen both for the kids when they do something like this and for their parents? Like, what's the message behind it? What's the eye opener, the aha?
I think we did one recently here in Kirkland, Indiana, at the bank parking lot. And these parents who had been involved brought their kids, and this was one of the biggest crowds we've ever had. And this mother came up and said, "My God, you can just feel the love here. You can feel how everybody is behind every one of these kids." And I've had people say, it's such an emotional roller coaster. You're laughing and smiling and you're crying, and and I said, yeah, because that is, what they bring to the world, this joy. And as I say in my book, happiness is the weather, joy is the climate. And you'll learn a lot. You'll really grow spiritually just being around these kids. They'll make you a better person. And one of the things that again, just the types of things, some of them think, well, maybe I can't do this. I've had parents go, "Oh, we're rougher than that." When we throw them into bed. And so again, trying to show them that, yes, they are in fact, they can be a little bit fragile, but they're not that breakable. And that's, I think, they love the kind of horsing around, getting thrown around. And I think it's a good lesson for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of kids that you throw around on the mat, I might have a special guest joining us today. None other than Jimmy Kennedy, who I think you met when he was about 2, maybe. Jimmy,
Yeah.
Are you there?
I think so. Hold on.
Absolutely, you are. Great. Oh,
there we are.
And you brought mom.
In picture and sound, yeah. The real
I feel honored because I've got 2 authors on the podcast now, because your mom wrote a book based on her experience raising you. Great to have you with us as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, good to be seen,
Happy
guys.
to be here.
So I remember if you wanted to share, I remember Chuck, you talking in your book, and I think it kind of crossed over with both books, about kind of the impression when you first met a doctor that kind of could see a future for Jimmy. You speak to that a little bit, Chuck, and so do you. Share a little bit about the first time you met this guy, this Dr. Doom.
Okay. Well, he was the first doctor that I felt like asked real questions about Jimmy, like what are the things that you enjoy doing with him, and wanted to get to know him. So I liked Chuck immediately for that reason. And it wasn't too far into the appointment where my husband Chooch said, "Is he going to walk?" Because no one had told us that Jimmy would walk. They said, "Well, we'll have to just see how he does in therapy and whatever." And whatever his ability was going to be, we were going to do our best with it and help him the best we could. But Chuck immediately says, "Oh yeah, he's going to walk." Like there wasn't any question about it.
Duh.
So Chuck, you had a chance to get this guy, Jimmy, on the mat with you a few years ago. Tell us about your relationship.
Well, I tell you something. I love this family. They are my family too. And I remember when Marie asked that, "Will he walk?" I said, "Of course he'll walk." He'd been to other doctors. I assumed they had told him that. They didn't. And Marie became emotional. And I remember looking at Chooch, and I always said, Chooch just looked like such a tough, rough guy. He looked like he was part of a motorcycle gang or something, and he just had the biggest heart. And I remember as Marie's crying and I'm grabbing some Kleenexes for her, I'm looking over at him, and he goes, "Oh, she's the," he's like mouthing, "She's the sensitive type," but he's got tears. And he just, yeah, the great.
Yeah. He cries as much as I do. So,
Yeah.
But not only that, Chuck has been, I cry when I talk. I don't care. Chuck has been there for our happiest and our saddest moments since the time we met him. He came to Jimmy's graduation. He's been a mentor to him through his career, with the wrestling, the Colts, getting on the field, and I'm wearing "It's fine, I'm fine, everything's fine" shirt because I knew that we'd be talking to Chuck today, and that's how he made me feel. And I was so nervous, I wrote everything down so I wouldn't forget anything, and Chuck would read it all and answer it all. And when I wrote my book, he was one of the first ones to read it and encouraged me to go to speeches with him and to talk about it, which also led to Jimmy becoming a public speaker. So he is family.
Absolutely.
My mom said he's the closest thing to an angel on earth that she's ever met. It's our whole family. It's not.
I was going to say, I feel a little bit like an amateur here with a true podcaster and a broadcast journalism major. Jimmy, welcome to the podcast, the host of JBK on Air. We're going to have you back for a separate episode so we can really talk to you. But tell us about this crazy guy up top of my Zoom screen.
Well, I was going to say, I don't know how many people on planet Earth can say that they've wrestled in a professional wrestling ring and played on an NFL field. I have that distinction because of Chuck. A lot of cool moments that most people, not just children or children with disabilities, people don't get. I've had the opportunity to do. And like Mom said, he introduced me to Jeffrey Gorman, who still works with the Colts now and has been a long-standing part of the Colts media staff. And I think I realized early on with Dad being in entertainment that, networking was important, but I took it seriously even at 12 years old. And, I'm not even 30 yet, and I feel like I've made some pretty good connections and have tried to make my own way as best I can, which Chuck demonstrated. If you put in the work and have the opportunity, which is the biggest thing. Chuck has given me plenty of opportunity, and reflecting on it, it's unfair how much love has been given to me, really, in this life.
Love's never unfair.
Now, Chuck, seeing these young kids that you meet become young adults, that doesn't make us feel old, does it, Chuck?
I don't know how he's that age when I'm still 35, but anyway.
We're the same age.
Yeah, Chuck doesn't age. We're just living in his world, and he's going backwards. That's the deal. So.
Hey, by the way, Jimmy, I love the hair. I had.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, I'm taking it back to Hendrix and Janis Joplin. That whole thing. So
It
yeah,
seems
He
like a little
calmed
bit
it
of a
down a little
throwback.
bit before he came on.
yeah.
It looks like a throwback to some pictures I've seen of you on the mat with Dr. Chuck. I think your hair was like that when you were
Yes.
little.
Yes.
Yeah, this would be a perfect opportunity for Chuck, to grab and do what he
No.
needs to do. Any kind of tactic to get the upper hand, that's what it's about.
In fact, I may have sent that picture. I probably sent that picture to you where Jimmy's choking me out. That ended up in the book. And I might say Jimmy actually learned how to network when he was like 5 years old. He was doing public speaking with me when he was 5.
That's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Oh, we would go to a party and I'm really not that talkative a lot of times. I'm fine sitting there with snacks. But Jimmy would walk around and he had a business card when he was 5 or 6 and would
It's
shake
true.
hands and give his card out and meet everybody. And he's been a good
Fantastic. I
networker.
love it. Okay, well, go ahead, Jeff.
One thing I wanted to say, Jim, was that the book that Marie wrote, and it had a nice subtitle about, helpful hints for families. And what I said, and I think in the endorsement that I made, I said, and as I encouraged other people to read it, I said, this isn't just a guidebook. This is a love story. And the 3, Chooch and Jimmy and Marie, I don't know that I've ever seen a family that so enjoyed each other's company. And so it's a blessing for me to get to be with them.
I love that. And I love what you said too about how you recommend it for a lot of your medical students as an insight into that world.
Yes, that is correct.
Well, I knew, I didn't tell you that we were bringing this surprise, but I knew you'd enjoy it. So to wrap up, we always ask people for the 3 keys, and there's 3 of you. So this is going to be really tough with this talkative crowd to give you each one. But when you're thinking about raising a child who has special needs, and especially a lot of parents, they're kind of thrown a curveball thing they didn't expect. If we had to pick 3 keys to success, what would be the advice of each of you? Ladies first, we'll start with Marie. What's your number 1 key?
I don't know. My mind's filled with 150 of them. I think the number 1 key is, I don't know how to word this exactly, but a big thing for me was just getting the information. What is it? What's wrong? What can we do? And then realizing that they're just words. I wrote in my book that I hated to say the word cerebral palsy. I would want to vomit. I'd call people and cry, but they're just words. You're just getting information to help your child. So I would say 1 is information. Get all the information you can. And if you're not good at it, then get a sister, a friend, your partner, whoever, someone who is, or record your appointments, because you can't always go back and ask those questions again at the same time and get the right answer that you need. And the other thing is that you have to do the work. You can get the information, but if you don't do the therapy, I don't care what kind of surgeries you have. To me, therapy is one of the most important things that you can do, and you'll probably have to do it for the rest of your life, whether it's mental, physical, whatever it is.
It's that day in and day out work. Absolutely.
Going back to the first one, that the information that you get, Jimmy is not cerebral palsy. It's just a small part of him. Don't let that overwhelm you or think that you have to explain yourself or your child to everybody else. And the third thing is that as a mother, I'm going to say that I know more about him than anybody else. I don't care if you went to school for 35 years. He came out of me. I know how he feels. And I am asking you for help, but you need to listen to what I say and what a parent says is valid and should be listened to. And don't be afraid to say it. Again, if you are, there are advocates at just about any facility. And if not, then join a group and get somebody to go with you, because you speak for your child, whether they can speak or not. You speak for them until they're 18. And you got to step up and grow up and do what you need do.
I had to make phone calls today. I hate it, but it's
He's making his own appointments now.
So.
Absolutely. So Jimmy, what would you have to add? That thank you, Marie. That was great to that as far as keys to success.
I would say two things. One, you have to accept sometimes what your child can't do, so then you can figure out what they can do. Ultimately, I mean, that made it a lot easier. You know, I figured out real quick, I'm not going to the NFL or NBA, and that's fine. But I can go and be on the sidelines and do something in a different capacity. The other thing, which, you know, not every family has this option, with it being a money-driven society, but I think that parents who have children with disabilities sometimes are overprotective, understandably so, and they have to give their child room to fail. Because the only way that I've gotten better or learned something where it stuck with me was when I failed and it went poorly.
I don't know when that
You
happened.
know, and yeah, I mean, you know, something going poorly is subjective, I guess, but you know, the ability to have a mistake go down and it not be covered up over and over, you know, mistakes happen. That's how you get better.
Yeah, the ability to
But
fail.
he has said that I'm not allowed to say the more you do it, the easier it gets one more time, because I've said that to him a million times.
All right,
Go
so
ahead.
Chuck, you mentioned this family being a unique one, and you've been around hundreds and hundreds. What do you think is their key to success that you got to observe?
Oh, love. As soon as you ask the three, what are the three? I immediately think faith, hope, and love. And yeah, you really sense that with them. And I always told people, I said, you know, my patients were just friends of mine who happened to be in predicaments. And I remember talking, in Jimmy's case, again, we were saying that, oh yeah, sure, he'll walk. Well, you know, there are some kids who won't walk. And what and Jimmy, I think, had a good point there, that, you know, understanding what those limits are, but also we learn much more from our failures than our successes. But one of the things I often told the parents was most important that their child got, that they were in the arena, however that happened. And so even in the pro wrestling, I mean, we've taken an 18-year-old young man who ventilator dependent, who has quadriplegia from trauma, and he decided he wanted to go off the top rope. Well, that can be done. And I just said, now, how long can you be off the vent? We managed to pull it off. But I think the idea that it's just has to be done differently, but you can still enter the arena, whatever that arena is.
Well, if you're meeting these folks for the first time, like I said when we started, it's hard to make this a short episode, but I do have to keep to my time promise. So we're probably going to have Dr. Chuck back, and I'm already working. He's got a busy schedule. I'm talking to his people, but I'm already working to try to get Jimmy Kennedy on our podcast. That would be what they call a good get for my podcast for sure. So thank you guys for being here today. And when I wrap up, could really use your help, listeners. We want to get this information into as many people, out to as many people as possible. Our goal is that we provide a little bit of education, something you can take away from this, hopefully some inspiration and a sense of community for people out there. So if you know somebody that could benefit from this podcast, we'd love your help. Go to our Facebook page, like the page, follow us there, follow us or subscribe on YouTube or on your favorite podcast platform. And as always, if you have an idea for a future guest that you think would add to the conversation, please message me on Facebook. Thank you so much. We know you have a lot of choices for listening. We'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.